Hello everyone, thanks a lot for joining us tonight, today, this afternoon, wherever you are. This is Marcel broadcasting live today again from Germany. I have added some church bells from the outside. This is the regular time when they start ringing at 6 usually, but I think within 2 minutes it all will be done. And actually you should not hear too much. Hopefully the microphone is not too sensitive for church bells. Today's topic is Aural ID, and to be precise, our Aural ID application version 2.1. So the recent version of our application that we have launched a few weeks ago. And some of you might know we already had a webinar about Aural ID version 2.0. So, for example, the basics of HRTFs and the overall processing and also how we generate your HRTF are still the same. So I will not spend too much time this time. Of course, I will cover it, but I would like to focus on just getting started with Aural ID 2.1, just to encourage you to download this application and to just make use of the free trial, which is now 30 days long. So it was extended from 2 weeks to now 1 month. And within this month, you can just, play around with it and do whatever you like to do to just, experience how it works. And my basic idea tonight is that I will just make it possible for you to just get started and just to, find out how it works for you specifically. Aural ID still, of course, is part of our Unio ecosystem, the Unio ecosystem, which is shown here as a nice line drawing connecting speakers, a 9320, our headphones, and of course a computer, is basically exactly about that we want to bring together different options to monitor sound. Or as our CTO Aki Makivirta puts it, the aim of the Unio ecosystem is to enable headphones to be used as a monitoring tool with a level of accuracy that loudspeakers have traditionally provided. So this is the aim. And of course, it's not an easy one. To be precise, it's not that easy to achieve that. But this is what we try with Aural ID and the Aural ID application. Most of you might know me because I'm doing these webinars on a regular basis. My name is Marcel, I'm living in Germany, and I'm working as a so-called senior customer experience specialist, or how I would call it, product specialist. So I'm just, there for you if you have any questions and for the complete Genelec ecosystem. I'm not an expert on the really old stuff because I joined too late, but we have so many people that I know that I can always make sure that even if you have questions about these old devices, there will be someone who can assist you. And to make this a little more interactive, and as I said, it's live, please use the comment functions on the platform you are using and just type in your questions. And then I will just go through all of your questions at the end of the session. If I'm not able to answer something, I will make sure that someone else can, and we will then just reach out to you using also the comments or of course by email. And of course support@genelec.com is always open for you. This is one of the photos we have as a part of our campaign we shot for 2.1, which actually tries to explain what Aural ID is made for. So as said, you are somewhere where you don't have speakers, but you have headphones. And then you would like to listen to something, for example, also an immersive audio, so complex multi-channel audio, as if you would have speakers. So this is what we call virtual loudspeakers. And in this photo, they are shown somehow as these green ghost speakers. They look a little ghosty, I would say. So this lady is able to work. Actually, I think this is in a hotel in Helsinki. The basic idea is, as said, that we want to give you a similar impression compared to loudspeakers. So what makes audio through loudspeakers special? Usually you work in stereo with 2 loudspeakers, but we all know that these 2 loudspeakers can somehow trick our brain. So we have 2 loudspeakers, but they can create a complete, somehow, wide stereo image, and also an image of depth, so that you can feel something is close to you, something is further away. And all of this is done using two speakers. An easy example, if both speakers just deliver the exact same audio with the same level and the same time of flight, and also, for example, room compensated, so that also the frequency response from both speakers is the same, then you hear something in the phantom center. So it will be in the middle. For example, a dry vocal of a pop recording usually should be relatively precisely in the middle if you are using a calibrated speaker system. Headphones have something that is a little more special because they are really close to your ears. So this is ultra, ultra, ultra near field somehow. And therefore we somehow experience sound in a different way. We still, of course, can hear a panorama, we can hear also depth, but everything seems to happen within our head. So this is how this graphic shows it. And the challenge now is it possible that you can get a sense of externalization that is usually only possible with speakers using headphones? And this is, as said, what we try to achieve with Aural ID and the binauralization of audio, that we have somehow virtual loudspeakers that really sound as if they would be outside of your head, which make it possible that you can experience a complete sound landscape also outside of your head. One of the key things is always the head-related transfer function, the HRTF, which actually is based on you, on the shape of your ears, on the size of your ears, on the shape of your ear canals, on your head, of course, upper torso. All of these things define how you somehow experience sound from different directions. And what you see here on the right side is already, I will just explain it in detail soon, sound arriving at your ears from different directions at different angles. As said, I will keep this rather short this time, but just that you are aware of what's happening. Let's say this speaker is playing from the left side. It's hard for me now because I think same for you. It's on the right side, but this guy, of course, is looking towards us, so it's playing from the left side. And we have direct sound getting to his ear without any, I would say, change. This is the direct sound. But what does, for example, the right ear get? This is already changed slightly because there is a head in between. And of course, there's also distance with these ears. And for example, what's happening with sound that is not only, coming directly to the ear, that is, for example, reflected by your shoulder. This is also a different situation. Both or all of these things change the magnitude. So for example, the level. So at the moment, your right ear will just receive the level slightly reduced compared to the right ear. Right, the left ear. I knew that this would happen. Just looking at it, I'm sorry. And now we have the similar thing that is happening with the time domain. So of course, sound is arriving at his left ear first, and it takes a little longer to reach his right ear. Similar things again happen if there is a reflection happening. Then you have a combination of direct sound and the reflected sound. And we all know that when we talk about speaker frequency responses, reflections can, for example, cause comp filtering or cancellation. So they have an influence on the overall frequency response. The HRTF, so the transfer function, is a way to look at this looking at the frequencies. So for example, this is now a diagram showing you the SPL on one axis and then the frequency range on the other axis. So it's 100 Hertz to 10,000 Hertz here. And the blue curve is his left ear and the orange one is his right ear. And you can clearly see, for example, that the influence on the frequencies is not that obvious for low frequencies because the wavelengths are long. So his size of the head, for example, is very, very small compared to the wavelengths, for example, of 100 Hertz, which is more than 3 meters. And but we have a huge influence, of course, for high frequencies with their shorter wavelengths. And this is now the image you have seen before. This is how this frequency responses look like for different angles. So, for example, here in the middle, we have azimuth 0, so this is just coming from the front. And you see left and right look very, very similar, as it should be. Yeah? And if we go to the left side, for example, a left speaker with 45 degrees, we already see, for example, magnitude then is higher for the left side and lower for the right side. Vice versa on the other side. And these are surround speakers. And you can clearly see, for example, there's a huge influence then, for example, at 270 degrees. You see one channel somewhere here, the right side, is drastically reduced, just because of all of the masking and shadowing that is happening. So you see, for every combination of angles, you will get a different response. And our brain is really smart at somehow calculating directions out of it. Because this is what's happening. Of course, your brain knows your ears and it knows, for example, exactly how these influences are specifically for you. And then it can perfectly usually find out, okay, for example, something came from, I don't know, 130 degrees approximately, or something came from the front. And as I said, this is what our brain is doing when there are real sound sources. So when we have, for example, a speaker, or of course also real sound sources like children, and I don't know. Children are especially of interest for high frequencies. Should be reduced in magnitude, usually. So this is how an HRTF works. A so-called common factor, this is also a term you might have heard about, shows some kind of an average magnitude for all directions. And this is something you usually see if you look at measurements from headphones, because this is exactly what you can read from there. This is the so-called common factor. And you see, this is, of course, interesting. This is also not a linear thing. So this is not comparable to speakers. This is just different. So headphones are always a completely different species. That's the way you pronounce it correctly, compared to speakers. How do we create your personal HRTF? We do not bring you to a studio. We do not somehow place microphones in your ears and then have a huge arc of speakers playing back sweeps. We try to make it a little easier, and we ask you to use our Creator app, which just allows you to record a video and 2 photos. And then we have some kind of a dimension reference when you place a ruler close to your ears. And then we use photogrammetry. This is the way how you can extract somehow from a video which is 3-dimensional and which offers a lot of different angles. You can create a 3D model of the subject you had been filming. So our application, for example, also exactly shows you what you should do. For example, you approach your ear, you then should turn around like a circle, just to make sure that we have enough overlaps and that we get all of these different angles. And we pay special attention, of course, to the ear canal as well. This is why we, for example, turn on the flashlight or the lamp all of your smartphones have included, that we can have a look into your ears as well. And our model offers later on the option to render around 830 different directions, which is pretty cool because this is a huge difference to other solutions. If we have these virtual speakers, for example, a 714, you can still fine-tune them. So you can make use of these 800 directions and just, somehow shift them until it really matches, for example, your speaker system or just what you would like to hear. Because sometimes it's really like that. As I said, our brain is perfect in the real environment. If you start simulating stuff, it just can be the reason that although from the math, it's 120 degrees, you hear it at 100 degrees. And then it's up to you to just, correct that. And that's perfectly fine. And this is what we always had on mind, that if we have a solution like that, it's very important that you can just work with it and you can fine-tune all of the settings, that you are not somehow forced to use, for example, a specific speaker setup or a virtual speaker setup and you cannot do anything about it. So, for example, this is one of the renderings we did. I will not tell you who it is, but he's one of our, our Genelec staff members, so I'm allowed to show that. You can be 100% sure, of course, for data privacy. Usually this is completely impossible to get something like that out of Genelec, and usually we even make sure that the face is absolutely not recognizable. Otherwise, we would be in trouble, because of course this is very sensitive data. As you all know, face recognition and things like that. So we really just use that to get the HRTF done, and then it's gone. And you see, we pay special attention to the details of the ear, of course. So this is where we have the most knots and the highest resolution. What you will get if you download the free trial version is a so-called standard HRTF, because we cannot offer you your personal HRTF for free, because this is exactly what will mean some money, and also, of course, where the R&D work was used for. So you will get the so-called KEMAR head HRTF, and KEMAR is, I think one of the first head and torso simulators created around 72. And is some kind of an average human being. This is how they call him. You can look at him and instantly, of course, you will see average usually means something, but it's, of course, different from what you look like. For example, I have not that round face. Someone else might have an even rounder face. So this is really just a first simulation. But to be honest, it works very well. So, for example, for me, all of the things in the surrounds work really well. So if I want to simulate a side surround or a rear surround, I really have the feeling something is playing from behind when I start using it with my headphones. So I think this is a very good way of getting started, and just to find out, is this technology interesting for you at all? Our concept is a little different compared to others. I already mentioned that some of them, for example, really somehow capture a studio. So they go to a real studio with real speakers. They use microphones in your ear canals, and then they play sweeps from the speakers. So they also capture the room and the room acoustics, and also, for example, some early reflections, all of that. Which can give you great results, for example, especially if, of course, the studio is a really high-level studio. But, of course, it's also tricky. Because coming from our SAM world, we usually try to make sure that speakers are neutral. So we will always have a look at the frequency response at a specific position for your listening position, and that we compensate that to get a neutral one. I'm not saying flat, because flat is your decision. You can, of course, change it, the target curve, but it should be neutral. And most of us are also a fan of direct sound. And I hope you agree that this sometimes can give you, I think, an even more honest somehow picture of a recording, because you do not color it with your own room. It's then really the recording itself. Let's say this recording captured some really nice ambience, and this, of course, should just be presented like it was recorded. And therefore, I'm always happy to see diagrams like that. This is from our grade report. This is a tool you can use with all SAM speakers to get an insight into your room acoustics. And this curve shows me a green curve, which is the direct sound. And then I have a red curve, which means late sound. So it's 20 milliseconds and later. And this always is helpful to see, how many diffuse reflections are already part of what you hear. And this is, for example, a very well made studio with good treatment. And as you see, there's a huge corridor of more than 12, 13 dBs, and even more in the lower mids. And so listening in that room just means I can really listen to what's on the recording and not my room. And this is why we try to really have this approach for Aural ID, or the Aural ID application as well. So we do not simulate the room. We also do not have, for example, different distance settings that usually just are based on higher amount of early reflections and stuff like that. we would be very happy if you get the impression of a good near field setup. So that is just giving you enough direct sound. And we are not interested in simulating the complete room. So what's exactly needed to get started? This is also a question I get relatively often, so I will be very honest now with you. Do you need Genelec speakers? This is not written here, but no, of course you do not need Genelec speakers. It's perfect as a reference, and it's highly recommended as a reference. But even if you don't own Genelec speakers, you can of course download this application. And the only thing you have to do is you have to register under mygenelec.com. Just create yourself an account. Some of you already might have it for registration of speakers, great reports, stuff like that. So get your account. This is, of course, also free. And then you will just root audio to a new virtual sound card that is installed. So after installation, you will see a virtual sound card called Aural ID Bridge. Then you will need a neutral pair of professional headphones. So you also do not need the 8550s. Of course, this is a very good basis for it because it is neutral and it is professional, but you can use any professional headphone. And what do I mean by professional? I usually mean that at a certain quality level, most headphones aim for being neutral. Some of them, of course, also have some kind of a tuning, like a target curve, but the overall response is very neutral and they deliver high resolution. And high resolution is very essential for binaural audio because otherwise it will be, changed too drastically by the headphones. So if you have, like a pair of consumer headphones that are very, very bass heavy, the overall experience will never be that precise and that good compared to, good pro headphones. And then, of course, something that can just feed your headphones, so an audio interface with a headphone output. And yes, you can even use, the mini jack output. I should not say that, but it's possible, the mini jack output of your MacBook. And what I will have to mention first here, and I will just mention it, I think, soon later once more. At the moment, Aural ID is only available on Mac. This is because of, the architecture of this virtual sound card. We plan to release a Windows version, but it's not clear at the moment when this will happen exactly. So hopefully within 1 year, but at the moment this is an app that is an application that is only running on macOS. If you then want to improve your experience, then you could decide to, for example, go full in and get yourself your personal HRTF with the Aural ID Creator app. This is what I was talking about. You could then use a calibrated speaker setup, for example, from Genelec, as a reference for the fine-tuning, for example, for the positioning, but also mainly for the coloration. This is also something you will have to spend time on because the coloration of binauralized audio sometimes can be a little tricky. So it just, for example, doesn't feel that warm in the beginning, or you have the impression that the mids are a little strange, some things like that. And usually you can correct this very well with EQ, but of course you need a reference that makes it easier for you. And therefore, for example, we then highly recommend having speakers close to you, like we say ultra near field. You can then later on bring them back, but if you just do this process, I would have them really close, like 30 centimeters, for example. With all the one speakers, this is very easy because they are point source speakers, but even with two ways, you can get really close. This is not a problem. And then, of course, listen, and listen. This is always something that is very important with for everything that is connected to audio. And compare between speakers and headphones and just take your time to adjust settings. This sometimes might just take you a few hours. Sometimes you will realize, okay, after a few days, you still want to change something, and that's, of course, perfectly fine. And if you're interested in a somehow complete solution, then you should, of course, check out our PRM. You will also see a photo later on this consists out of our 9320A, the reference controller, which allows you to control GLM, which is at the same time an output interface delivering IS-EBU and analog audio. So you can just connect it directly via USB-C to your computer and use it like an output interface. And then the 8550s, which are calibrated at our factory. So you can just enter the serial in GLM, and then the 9320 will get a precise additional EQ curve that is exactly the perfect match for the frequency response of your specific 8550. And this is how it looks like. So this is the controller with the measurement microphone and the 8550 headphones. Yeah, I just spoke about that. It's a very versatile solution. And you can, of course, have, in addition to this somehow serial number-based equalization, there's another EQ included. But this is a very basic one, I have to say. This is really something for basic adjustments. Fine-tuning I would always do with the EQ of the Aural ID application. Yeah, already mentioned. So I spoke about it quite often. Now here you can see it. This is the 2.1 version of the Aural ID application. The main difference, to be honest, to 2.0 is that we brought back the equalizer and also, envelopment setting to the main page, because I think this is very important that you always have the equalizer visible, because it's really an important tool that you also can see, for example, if this button is green, that it's active. And it was hidden in the menu before, and also in the menu then you had active, non-active, which was a little confusing. And I think this was a good decision to bring this back to the main page. The application itself is used to render binauralized audio. So you can feed, for example, multi-channel audio, also stereo audio from a source to it, and it will use an HRTF, your personal HRTF or the standard HRTF like KEMAR, to render binauralized audio, so audio for headphone playback. Already mentioned, you can freely position and edit virtual sound sources, so you are absolutely flexible. It's a standalone application with these virtual sound card drivers, which makes it very easy to use, because you can, for example, route the DAW's output to this sound card. And you can also route the Dolby Atmos renderer to this sound card. And in the beginning of Aural ID, we had it implemented as plugins in the DAW. And as I said, this sometimes is more complex, because then it sometimes sits at the wrong position in your workflow. And now, being a standalone application, you have full control. We offer 3 different HRTF modes, and it's very important to check these out. I will also show you soon what they are about. Hello, my daughter's just coming home. And we have a so-called low-frequency envelopment option. This is also something that is, I would say, exclusive for us. This is something that makes it possible that if you have low-frequency content, which is not mono, so for example, forget about pop music, go for big orchestral recordings, and then the low frequencies usually are not mono, and you have completely different phase situations sometimes as well. And then you can emulate that on headphones as well, so that if it's a good recording, if you're in a good room, in a calibrated room, you can localize even low frequencies to some amount. And this is then possible with the low frequency envelopment option as well. And as already mentioned, Mac OS only at the moment. You can look like a guy from Italia, from Italy. Hopefully they will be part of the next World Cup. Come on, This was just, it's always not cool. And this is how our head tracker looks like. So it gives you, one green eye and one red eye. And it's just based on a camera. You can use whatever camera you have available on your computer. It can be the built-in camera. It can be an external camera. And this is used for head tracking. Makes it a little more flexible compared to, for example, if you would have to attach something like a sensor to your headphones. So it's only the camera used. And this is a separate application that you can also download if you just enter the Aural ID section on My Genelec. As said, this is where you should go to. This is My Genelec. You can register and then you can log in. And if you scroll a little and go to Shop, you will see Aural ID. And before you shop anything, of course, you're more than welcome to spend money. But first of all, just go for the free trial, which, as said, is now 30 days. And just click on Activate. And this will then bring you to that page where you can download the installers and also the head tracker. We have two versions of the head tracker. One is for the older Macs with Intel processors, and the second one is for M series, so Silicon. We have a short quick setup guide that also, in addition to this webinar, should make it possible for you to get started. And of course, you can also have a look at the quite extensive manual if you like to. After you installed your Aural ID application, please make sure that you allow access to the microphone. Sometimes this sounds a little strange if your Mac is asking you, is Aural ID allowed to access the microphone? But you have to allow that because this also means that you can route stuff to virtual sound cards. So this is just needed. Usually it just works from the start. First of all, I would recommend going to the routing menu, and then it's now called I/O setup. This was also a little different in the version before. It's now called I/O setup. I think everyone is used to that term. And this brings you to this nice dialog box. First of all, on the left side, you can just select one Aural ID bridge that somehow matches your application. So we have different ones, for example, a 16 channel, a 32 channel. This just allows you the routing of, the maximum amount of, for example, 16 channels, which would be enough for 714 in that case. There's, of course, no problem, to only route 2 channels to it. This is just for this overall setup. And on the right side, you should somehow select the device that is used to monitor your binauralized audio, so the output of the Aural ID application. For me, I selected 9320 because for obvious reasons, I have this device. You could also use, as said, just any audio interface that is connected. And of course, for this side, you only need stereo, because binauralized audio, like the name is saying, bi, is about 2 channels. This is what is sent from the Aural ID application. And this one is for all of you who also have a speaker setup. Can also be stereo or can also be multi-channel. Because what's cool about that, you can switch in Aural ID between listening to the binauralized audio or the speakers. And if you select loudspeakers here, for example, from this list here, then it will route the audio through directly to the speakers. So you don't have to change, for example, the output. Let's say you are listening to Apple Music using Aural ID Bridge 16. And then, of course, it's more elegant to have the same Aural ID Bridge 16 bringing audio to your speakers compared to always switching then to your, I don't know, for example, Digital Audio Denmark interface or whatever you are using. So this is pretty handy, and just make use of that. Then I would recommend importing an HRTF profile because this is needed to get a binauralized rendering. And here you can see, first of all, you usually should go for import from My Genelec. This is also what you have to do if you have the free trial. So because this is just somehow you have your account and you applied for the free trial. So it's connected to your My Genelec account. So I would choose import from My Genelec. you should then log in, and then you can just select, for example, the KEMAR heads profile. And this is downloaded. And what's good to know, the moment it is downloaded, it's also stored on your hard drive. So then you can always use this option, import from hard drive as well. This is then possible without any problem. And you see now Aural ID shows KEMAR heads here. And at the moment, this is the output I spoke about. I have selected Aural ID out, which means, for example, my device for the headphones. And if I would switch there, I could go to the speakers as well. What I already did here as well is I selected a layout. So first of all, you will see this really small single speaker, and I think, fantastic, I just got this great solution from Genelec to simulate mono. Of course, you can do that, but it's rather boring. So if you go for monitor layout under routing, you can just choose from a lot of standard setups. You can also program your own ones. If you want to do that, this is worth looking at the manual, because this means I think it's a JSON file that has to be edited. But usually you should be really good with the options we give you here. So for example, someone who wants to listen to Apple Music, to the spatial audio options or the Dolby options, I would always go for 714 because this is the standard they have there. And then, yeah, it looks like this. So we use you see some kind of color coding. It's still a really soft one, but these inner speakers you see are a little bluish. Blue always means the sky, so these are the ceiling speakers. So this would be center, left, right, and then side, surround, and this is rear surrounds. And what you see here in the middle is an arrow that is just your head position at the moment. So if you activate head tracking and you click on that, this arrow will start moving, and of course also the rendering will just follow what you are doing with your head movements. Now let's bring some audio into Aural ID. The easiest option is just use your system audio. For example, also just stereo, and then just go for your settings, select sound, and select the Aural ID Bridge 16 as the output device. This is because I have chosen the 16 bridge as the input device. As said, you also have 2A, 2B, 32, 6, 64. But as said, I'm a fan of 714, so I usually go for the 16. There's one more step you will have to do, otherwise Apple Music will somehow not see this sound card as a valid device for 714 and spatial audio. You will have to open the audio MIDI setup and click on the Aural ID bridge, once again the one you are using, and then just click on Configure Speakers. And in Configure Speakers, you will then have to select 714. I'm sorry, my mouse is always doing strange things. You should select 714, and then just make sure it should be just one after the other, so 1 to 12, and then everything should be correct already. Because this somehow shows Apple Music, okay, this virtual sound card is a device that can do 714, and then it will be used, for example, if you activate it. I will also show you how to activate it here. So first of all, this is the settings tab from Apple Music, and it might look different for you. So a lot of these options might not be visible when you click on playback. Usually this is the case when you did not assign a 714 output. So for example, you did not assign the Aural ID Bridge 16, or you don't have a subscription, because of course these things are also part of the Apple subscription and you don't have access to any multi-channel audio without it. But if you have done that, you will see this playback, and then the important thing is Dolby Atmos automatic. This is what you will have to select. Please don't ask me why always is wrong, but always usually means that the device itself, so Apple Music, is giving you a binauralized version already. So it would completely make things So it would be just combine two ways of binauralizing things. So just go for automatic, and this gives you somehow the discrete tracks. I cannot talk really about discrete tracks because this is heavily compressed stuff, but it just then sends out, for example, a center, a left, a right, a surround, right, surround, left, and so on to Aural ID, and you can also see it in there. So this is the way. Click on settings, playback, and make sure that spatial audio is set to automatic. And then, of course, have a look at this really small thing you can find here. For example, by the way, highly recommended this album by Justin Gray, won the Grammy. And we had the pleasure to have him at our booth in Cologne at Tonmeistertagung. This is incredible music. So wonderfully recorded and produced, really completely thought as immersive right from the start. He told me then it was a challenge to get the stereo mix done because he started completely new after doing everything in immersive. And as said, every production that shows this small Dolby Atmos logo here can give you interesting mixes. So it's really worth checking them out. There are more mixes outside than you think. So a lot of, or most of the productions that are just released, I think within the last 3-4 years, usually are available in Atmos as well, especially also the larger productions. So for example, even Billie Eilish, which is also worth listening because they do some pretty cool stuff with their immersive mixes. If you are on the pro side and you just look at me as a Marcel, I'm listening to ADMs. I will never listen to Apple Music and the compressed stuff. I'm only listening to ADMs. So ADM is an uncompressed format for Atmos. Then you might know this app. This is the Dolby Atmos Renderer, which of course is also highly popular for all Pro Tools workflows still. And it's the same here. You just have to select the output device, Aural ID Bridge 16. From then on, you can just listen to the binauralized version from the Aural ID application. And any DAW, usually at the moment, most of them, any professional one, most of them offer native support for multi-channel audio in something like 714. And for example, in Cubase, it's also absolutely easy, Cubase Pro. Just select as an output device the Aural ID Bridge 16, and then you can just create a bus, and you see it's already there. It's really interesting to see it's by default like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 7, 8, 5, 6. But it's correct. I checked it. I think this is something they just do not follow the regular Dolby order. So if you see it like that, this is correct. I checked it. Yeah, and then you can prove that you really achieve, for example, multi-channel audio from your source by just opening. I was just not showing this, I'm sorry. It's in the same menu. It's under routing, and then you can see the channel assignment. Sorry, I forgot to capture this. But it says routing and then channel assignment. And then you can just see, here you have a matrix where you can, of course, also change routing. And what is really nice that we have these small meters also just showing you, okay, something is sent into the Aural ID bridge and into the Aural ID application. And what I really also like, you might know that from GLM, you can turn on this level metering within GLM so that the speakers icons fill with something when audio is playing. With GLM, it's not really in sync because it's completely, there's a lot of delay in it. Here it's relatively in sync, and I, of course, use it mainly for troubleshooting. So, for example, I use this view and then just solo the center track in my Cubase session to see if it's really just, visible at the center. And makes it also way easier. This wasn't there before, this metering within the main window. Small window with a lot of power. This is just opening the moment you click on a speaker and gives you the full control for azimuth and elevation and gain. So you can just, freely position it on a somehow virtual globe around you. And of course also compensate for gain differences. Sometimes it's needed. This is also quite interesting, but for example, also in my HRTF, I also have to compensate, for example, the right side light slightly, because otherwise it's not really for me in the center. To just make use of that. That's perfectly fine. Sometimes people ask, hey, am I allowed to touch this? Because, it's a calibrated, personalized HRTF, just generated for me. It should be perfect. So yeah, it should be, that's true. But still, of course, it's your brain that is now doing the processing. And luckily, we cannot capture your brain. So feel free to change these things. For tonality, the EQ section is very, very important. And you see this is a more detailed and complex one than we have in the 9320. So we really have complete 6 bands. And usually this is absolutely enough to get everything adjusted as you like it. It's now also a little more user-friendly, I would say. For example, the moment you touch one of these knobs, it also becomes active. And small details that you can change the Q factor. So we forced our R&D to make it a little more, similar to the DAW EQ options we have. So it's also a little easier now to work with it. File structure, it's just, I think, sometimes of interest if you are looking for something. As said, if you just open, it's under Documents and then Genelec Aural ID. And there you can then find these folders like profiles. For example, everything you download from your My Genelec account is finally placed there. And you see, in this case, it's KEMAR HRTF and my profile from 23. And it's Aural ID 2. So this is something, obviously, that is only usable for Aural ID. This is not a SOFA file. If you are into SOFA files, I will mention that again. This is a file that can be used with any third-party software. You can also get that for sure. If you just, buy your personal profile and you just also check the SOFA file option, then you will receive the SOFA file as well. Actually, 2 versions of the SOFA file. Yes, about low frequency envelopment. I already mentioned it. You can read it, but I think I will just show it to you. This is the second option under the equalizer. This is called envelopment. And important, the naming envelopment means something in general that envelops you. We mean low frequency envelopment. Let's see, probably we might change that naming because it has nothing to do with a traditional envelopment, for example, like using early reflections or something like that. This is really only about how bass frequencies are handled that are somehow not in the middle, so that are not mono and where there are phase differences. And you can really just play around with that. I would go for something that, of course, has different panorama settings for bass frequencies. For example, classical recording, or also something you do on your own. And then I would really play around with compensation and frequency limit. Frequency limit is quite obvious. For example, at the moment, this says 80. So only frequencies below 80 are somehow processed by this tool. You can go also higher and lower. And compensation then makes sure how somehow heavily this is processed. And I would try out something like that, just to get a feeling for it. This is really 100% and relatively high. And then try to find something that works for you and gives you the most convincing results. If you feel that it's not needed, I would say, for example, if you in pop music that is mainly, of course, having the low end in mono, you can, of course, also just turn it off. This is also one of the good things. You always have these switches, and you can easily turn it off and on to compare it. But for more complex music, it can be very interesting to work with that. Already seen, once again, the Italian guy with the Italian glasses. And this is just how it looks like when you click on the arrow in the middle. Then this window opens. You will have to activate head tracking. And then you see always I was looking quite straight. You see it was only -2 and 3. You will see these values change all the time when you start moving. And if you also have the impression that you should somehow compensate for an offset or something, you can just click on settings and do that. And of course, what is also sometimes really useful, not everyone is, for example, having the same position as his 0 position. You can have your position and click on set 0 direction, and then it's done. For those of you who are also using SAM monitors, I hope some of you do, GLM also knows about Aural ID, and you can see that, for example, with this small icon here. This is, of course, now how it looks like when you use the 9320. So you have these options here: headphones output, analog output, digital output. And it's programmed like that. The moment I select the headphones output on my 9320, it will automatically turn on the binauralized processing in Aural ID, and it will look like this. So you will see here this green dot with an ear compared to this when I switch to my speakers. You see the difference, then it will just not be green anymore. And what's also obvious, some of you do not know that, I guess, the moment I switch to headphones, this group gets yellow because it's muted. This is the way we think about it, so it's always the headphones or the speakers, not at the same time. I know that some recording engineers sometimes make use of it, that they really listen to their speakers, and for example the artist is wearing headphones. This is unfortunately not doable with 9320. It's always this or that. Digital device. I spoke about the HRTF modes, and you can find these under Profile and then HRTF mode. And I think most important, try it out. Because this is really something you have to experience yourself. The differences are huge, I would say, and usually it's pretty obvious what works best. But it was funny to see, for example, I'm a huge fan of the immersive setting, and one of my colleagues in the US loves neutral. And this is just, once again, how our brain works, how the HRTF works. But yeah, this is something you should just try out. Both of these profiles usually work perfectly fine with any type of, as said, professional neutral headphones. That's also the reason why I recommend using them. The immersive one clearly, of course, focuses on the directional factor so that you can get a good localization. And usually I would say the tonality is closer from the start to what I hear in stereo. And for me, neutral is a little more colored. Of course, I can start compensating for that with headphones. Some people favor neutral for stereo listening. So if they really just want to simulate a stereo setup that is no longer in their head but in front of them, then neutral can be a really good option. And raw, for me, usually sounds really strange from the start, because indeed you would have to really equalize your headphones separately. So this is a different approach that gives you access to the complete HRTF data, but you will then have to equalize the headphones separately. So you see there is another option here, headphones used with raw HRTF, and then you can also find a list of a few headphones that are already measured by us, and you could then play around with that setting. Try it out. Especially if you have one of these headphones. For me, usually, as said, it's easier for me to get a good starting point with immersive and neutral. And it's very important to understand that you, of course, can use, as said, any pair of headphones that is just neutral, even if we don't list profiles for them, or even if we don't have them implemented here. This is not really needed. And yeah, just feel free to test it on your own. How does the process look like if you would like to get your own personal HRTF profile? You would have to download the Genelec Aural ID Creator app. This is just in the App Store. And this is also, of course, possible to use on Android, because yeah, it's not related to the Mac world what's done here. So of course you can use any other smartphone than an iPhone as well. And you will also have to have a My Genelec account. If you have downloaded the free trial option, you already have it. You can just log in. You can then choose that you want to purchase your Aural ID profile. And then the app will just, guide you through all of the steps that are needed. So you start with 2 photos, and you can just place a ruler above your ears. It's not needed that it's a transparent one. This was just for us for the photo. It will still work perfectly fine because we really only need the complete dimension of the ear. And for example, it's not important for us that we see the ear canal here. This is just to be the reference for the scaling. And then ideally you should have a second person because you cannot really do it on your own. And this person will to have, it's a workout. It's a small workout. So the person will have to walk around you, will have to approach you, will have to shoot the details from your ears. And the app will exactly tell you what to do. There's also a nice video with Darren and Purang showing you how to do it. If you have a larger room, of course, this is great. But usually it works, I would say, in a 10, 12 square meter room perfectly fine as well. It's great to have a good lighting. And also to avoid that, for example, the sun is shining through the windows, because this can just make it harder for the camera to capture, everything in detail. Yeah, and once again, this is then what we do at our, at our server stage, that we calculate the model, and that we just offer you this HRTF then for the use as a SOFA file or in our own Aural ID application. Yeah, and then you now see it's no longer saying KEMAR. I now loaded my personal profile. And and then of course you can also compare these. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to compare these within, just, I would say, a fraction of a second, like groups in GLM. You will always have to load the profile again. And of course, this causes some delay. But still, if you know material well, and if you are just, paying some attention to, for example, find a good part of the audio and then compare it, it's still really doable that you can, I think, easily understand the differences between then your personal profile and the standard profile. And these are the so-called SOFA files, specially oriented format for acoustics. This is the full name of it. And this is used especially in research quite often. And you will always get, usually it's around 6 versions at the moment. So for different sampling rates, 44.1 to 96. And then it's DTF and standard. So one is with common factor, one is without. Yeah. If you want to have the details, I can, of course, let you know them. And this, of course, also would be an option to already use our Aural ID, so your personal HRTF, on PCs, for example, using a software like Virtuoso, because Virtuoso allows SOFA file import. And then this is doable. For example, Jungkook Lee, who is the main guy behind Virtuoso, he's also using a profile we did for him. Finally, that you just have seen it, this is the PRM solution once again. So if you are up for it, you are more than welcome. It's the 9320 controller, the pair of calibrated headphones, the 8550. You get a measurement microphone because, of course, you can calibrate your SAM speakers with this device as well. So a GLM kit is not needed then anymore. Then you have 2 types of cables, and of course also you can change the ear cups and the headband as well. And just that you have seen it, this is where you can load the calibration settings. You will go to GLM, click on your 9320 icon, and then if you go to settings, you see custom equalizer, is how it's called. And then, for example, you can select Genelec 8550. Then, for example, for me, this was the leather ear cup, because it really is a little different sound-wise. It's, for example, a little closer than the other one. And then you can just enter the serial number, and that's it. And then, of course, also the 9320 knows the sensitivity of the headphones, which makes it easier to align the levels, that you can just be sure that if you compare between speakers and headphones, that the level is identical. Yeah, I would say that's it for now. So thanks a lot for being with me. I already mentioned it. If you would like to reach out to us, just contact support@genelec.com, and there's a great team of people waiting for you. And usually we are also very fast. At the moment it's vacation season in Finland, but the rest of Europe is still, you know, the perfect backup. So great. And then I have one question mark left, which is for you. So if you are up for it, you can just ask some questions, and I will just have to switch a few things here with my computer. And now finally I will show you that I'm getting older. Glasses are needed. So just a second. Yeah, I have questions. That's great. First of you, Ellen, thank you. This is just a feedback, and thanks a lot for sharing this feedback. 914 is of course fun, without any question. So also please feel free to check out Aural ID as well, if you want to have the 914 with you when you are traveling or something. Then we have a question. Isn't it better to select a higher number of channels in the bridge when working in a DAW? Okay, this is a very good question. The DAW itself usually, of course, has output format defined. So for example, you mix something for 916 or you mix something for 714. And I'm only talking about these channels because Aural ID somehow, you know, is at the end of the chain and is receiving the somehow master channels. So everything that's happening, for example, with your audio mix. So for example, you can have, I don't know, 80 objects, 90 objects, and you just, you know, make strange things with them. This is happening within your DAW and will be in the end rendered to the output of the DAW. And we use Aural ID only for listening to the output of the rendered output of your DAW. This is why we, for example, do not need 128 channels or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Higher numbers of channels than you're working with. Correct. Yeah. So I hope this was the correct answer. So you can think about it like, you know, how many speakers do you have, for example? And if you then have 128, then I'm super happy. Yeah? And you will be one of our customers of the year. But usually it's a 916 is already a pretty large setup. Yeah? So this is perfect. Really nice one. Just a grazie from Francesco. Thank you. Grazie mille. And greetings to Italy. You will be at the next World Cup. I trust in you, really. It's possible. Because Infantino will make it 64 teams or even more. I don't know. So it's possible. This was no irony. I was running around with an Italian flag in 1990, although of course I was a fan of Germany, but I still was also always a huge fan of Italy, and I was always liked traveling there. So I was running through Germany with an Italian flag during the 90 World Cup. Great. So thank you so much for joining. And as said, it's always possible to reach out to us directly, and we are more than happy to be in contact with you. And then have a nice rest of the day, have a nice evening, and see you soon. And I will just remove my glasses again. I look younger. All the best. See you.